Hi, hello community, PLAYERIG'N here. I just got back from GDC, Game Developers Conference, a couple of days ago, and this is basically like a yearly game developers like event where all the game devs all around the world they come together for meetings and networking. The highlights of my event was probably when I was hanging out with my Indian friends, which I met in like Bangalore. If you remember, I went to India like in December, and during that trip I was visiting basically all the gaming studios in Bangalore. And I basically met some friends, and we basically met up in India. But basically, like, one of the guys in my friends group, he was like, "Hey, my boss is calling me up. Let's go to this party." I was like, "Okay, let's go." But little did I know, this random party that we went to, no, we went inside. We went upstairs, which is like this VIP room, and we saw a bunch of like Indian guys, which I recognized, like three or two of them. Because I used to work for Krafton, and obviously I'm the PUBG guy, but I was a PUBG leaker, PUBG data miner, PUBG news guy. So obviously, like, I recognized some of the faces, and then right in the back of the room was Sean Yunosan, which is like the Krafton CEO of, India's division. And I was like, wow, what a surprise meeting, right? The first guy I recognized was this Indian guy who was like one of the first guys in India to IPO, and he was also one of the first guys to get hired by Krafton, and then a couple others. But it also turned out that, if you remember, like in my Indian trip, right before I left, I was going to visit this studio named Mayhem Studio, which is like this biggest, gaming studio in like India, in Bangalore. But then, like, I didn't choose to like visit them, even I visited everyone else, because, my flight was about to end, and also at the same time, like, these guys were pretty big, right? I didn't think I was gonna be able to get in and like be able to talk to them, but it turns out the person hosting the party was actually the founder of, or one of the heads of Mayhem Studios. So we headed off, and like we actually talked about who I was and what we did, all that stuff. And he wanted me to play test his game. I was like, okay. We talked with the Krafton CEO guy for a bit, and then obviously it was a pretty good like conversation, like. But at one point I thought I was like, maybe I shouldn't be there, because obviously all of these guys were pretty important, and I was like an indie solo developer, right? I think we stayed there for about 15-20 minutes maybe. But after that we left the party, and we went to this Indian restaurant, and we had something called butter chicken, which is like this curry dish with, you break some bread, you dip it in there, and you bake just like chicken in there. There's like butter, it's like sweet. And obviously there's like a hint of spice, but it's not too spicy, because it is an Indian dish that is like British influenced. So it is like, much more catered towards international tastes. And then, also we had our first Waymo, which is like the self-driving car thing in San Francisco. I don't think it's anywhere else. I don't think it's in New York as well. I think it's just in San Francisco. I might be wrong. But it's like Uber, but instead of like drivers that maintain their own cars, it's actually self-driving. It just drives around randomly. You see them. There's like cameras. There's LiDAR sensors, which is basically like this laser thing. Every iPhone has them, by the way. Basically, it's like they shoot lasers, and they graph out like a 3D image. It made some pretty like interesting corners, because like we used the Waymo to drive to like Golden Gate Bridge. On our way to Golden Gate Bridge, which is like like half an hour drive or 20-minute drive from where we were. It was able to make like these pretty interesting like hard turns that I didn't think like an AI self-driving car would. So that was like pretty interesting. So like the technology is there, but it just hasn't been scaled up yet in like, I guess, in the United States. And it just needs some time. And people did tell me that the Waymo is actually cheaper than Uber, but the reason why like it's sometimes more expensive is because of demand and supply. Another interesting thing that happened was like my first trip in San Francisco. I got invited to like this pretty high-end party. It's like, I think it's called Pragma. It was called Pragma, the Pragma party. I wanted to meet these Hathor guys. They're the guys that were responsible for the servers that I wanted to get it set up, but they weren't there, or at least I didn't see them anyways. Maybe like I was busy talking or playing ping pong. But basically there was like a ping pong table, and the first guy I met and basically invited me to play ping pong, and it turns out that guy was basically like my mentor's mentor. He's like the guy my mentor learned from about netcode. He's like the OG netcode guy. So like everything I learned from my mentor, like this guy basically like helped with that as well. So he's basically like my grandmaster, That's what we call him. We call him my grandmaster. We call him my Sifu. So it's like, holy crap! He's like the first guy I randomly bump into. It turns out he's like we already had some kind of like indirect connection. So that was super interesting. And I also got to meet Brian Corrigan, which is like the former head of North America for PUBG. I also met the Mad Glory team, which they got hired by Krafton, and they were basically made up of. They basically made up the North American PUBG team, at least in the New York division, anyways. And let's see what else happened. When I first got, when I first got there, like I was just wearing like a shirt. Everybody else had like jackets or like some kind of like outerwear. Like from the movies, like from film, from media that you typically see like California is like pretty sunny and like pretty warm. But then I guess maybe it's because of the weather that I got there. It was like windy. It was like cold. It's like holy crap. So my Uber driver recommended me that I just walk to Chinatown and just buy like a jacket. And it was like $20. I was like, okay, I'll just get it. And, I had to randomly walk around because it's not on Google Maps. It's pretty grassroots. Like, Chinatown is like pretty grassroots and word of mouth. And I basically found out that Chinatown is actually pretty warm compared to the rest of downtown. But there was a third thing. There was a third pretty like interesting thing that happened. See, the thing with GDC is that like you don't actually go to GDC, the main events, to like do the actual meetings. The main stuff that happens at GDC are like the coffee shops, the hotels, the events, the parties that happen like surrounding GDC. So that's the actual stuff that you're supposed to go to. And there's even like sort of like a meme that goes within like the game developer community where like you don't actually buy like a pass to GDC. You just like go to the surrounding areas around GDC because like of how normal that is. I guess we could talk about like the actual GDC events. I did meet some like game developers. I did meet some server guys, which I wanted to do. I did meet some new games. There's like, but a lot of these weren't like true multiplayer games. They were like co-op games. They were like single player games. And the most like multiplayer we got to was like this Genshin Impact lookalike. So it's pretty co-op. But no like true multiplayer PvP game that I actually saw, which was like a bummer because like making a multiplayer game is like really hard, and I guess like even for like seasoned developers, it is still hard for them to do. But basically, like back to the main point, like the third thing that really happened, that was really interesting, was when I was walking around, I noticed like this party, and I obviously randomly bumped into it, randomly noticed that it was on online on a website. And then I saw this really long line when I got there. I was like, oh, what is this about? Later that I found out that the party that I went to, the random party that I went to, was actually the biggest like night party at GDC. 8,000 people joined. So I was like, holy shit. Like I literally just randomly bumped into this. And when I was at the party, there was like this guy named Jason Harris that gave this really interesting talk. He basically said that like the game industry was moving towards a trend where we were moving away from big overbloated, big budget games, and we're moving back to indie games or smaller games. And he believes that the future trend is going to be indie game developers, or it was going to be AI-driven like games. My personal theory is that I believe the future is content creator-made games. So it's sort of like a mix of both AI in a sense that AI democratized game development, but also at the same time it's a mix of indie games because a content creator would be like an indie game developer. So that's my theory. I also told him that like I believe PlayerUnknown and PUBG was sort of like one of the first content creator-made games, except like obviously PlayerUnknown wasn't like your traditional content creator. When he was making like the Armor Battle Royale, he wasn't just making a game. He was also making the graphics. He was also making the videos. He was also making the promotion materials. He also had his own websites. So in that sense, he was actually sort of like a creator, content creator in his own rights, right? So he was serving a community. We also met this modder guy that turned into like a video game developer for Riot Games. He heard my story and he told me that like, he knew that I was from Hawaii. And he told me that like when he started, there basically wasn't a game developer scene, and he basically had to build a game developer scene like within his own community, within his own city. So that's like puts an interesting perspective because this isn't like a video game, right? You don't just level up from elementary school to middle school to high school, and all of a sudden, pop in you go, you work in game development. No, there's actually like a little bit of community building is actually much more grassroots. It's like much more dynamic than that. It's not really straightforward. So that's what I thought was interesting. And obviously, I'm making my own game with my own community, and we're all data miners, we're all self-taught learners, we're all people that reverse engineering like what we see in games, and we sort of like self-teach ourselves the process, right? My animator was like this guy who was like a modder for like the Stalker games, and my 3D modeler is like this self-taught learner from India in Bangalore, and which I got to know when I was in India. And he basically made some models for like some pretty big games as well. Not that big, but like I would say like AA games. And then my server guy is a self-taught learner from the days when he made servers for Counter-Strike. And so we're all like self-taught learners here. We didn't go through like a professional, like 1, 2, 3, bop, 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 like linear progression. So it's really interesting because even though I met like these seasoned veterans from 20 years ago who are like me in a sense that they were modders, they were data miners turned game developers, a lot of the actual developers, apart from these like top guys, these really seasoned veterans, a lot of like the guys in the middle, they were like employees. They were like people that actually worked for other people. So it's really weird because it's almost like that Jason Harris guy was right, where we're sort of like moving back into a circle. We're moving back to indie games. We're moving back to this more discovery phase. We're sort of like moving from the modder to employees, and then we're moving back to like modders again. In this case, like I'm part of that. That's really interesting. But hopefully, like that wasn't too confusing. At least maybe like you enjoyed like the talk, or at least hear me talk. Obviously I ramble on for a bit, and also learn for a bit that like sometimes when I say stuff, like people don't get it because I'm just like thinking so far ahead. But that's fine, right? As long as you enjoyed the actual talk. So that's about it. And right now I have a really big problem because, in November and December I had my game and actually had my server working. But all of a sudden, like the last couple of days, I found out that my server no longer worked, and I have no idea why. But the thing is, like usually when these things break down, you have like an error bug, you have like a clue about something that you added recently, which you can sort of like remove and like debug and check what the actual problem is. But like this far in, since November, like I don't even know like what I added in. I don't even know like any error messages. So I don't even know like what even the problem is with my servers are. So I did say that I want to do like a playtest on the 28th, but like now I'm starting to think like holy crap, like this is really crazy. But hopefully I do get it solved, and like I do get the servers going. But yeah, that's all for today, and hopefully I give you like an update video later in the future. I should probably start uploading more videos. But yeah, see you next time.